Um, I'd say that like I'm not one of those people who's extremely competitive, and if I lose, I'll like start crying or whatever. But I do want to win, and I do try really hard to do a good job.
It took us by surprise. We knew something was wrong with him. We weren't sure what. I mean, he made eye contact with us as an infant. When he was about 1.5, 2 years old, I noticed that he wasn't quite making great eye contact. I remember telling him, look at me, to see if he'll look at me in the eye, and he could really do it.
He had actually a brain tumor that was pressing on his optic nerve, and it caused him to go blind. And so within about a week, we realized that we went from thinking maybe he needed glasses to realizing that he was actually completely blind.
I used to think that I was really restricted in the things that I could do, but over time, mostly with different technology, I realized there are different things that I could do. Like, I can try to read a book about it, or just try to think of some way that I can do it, because really you can do almost anything.
My father, who I'm not that close to, was a state champion wrestler. Yeah, he's a pretty tough guy. My cousin was a state champion wrestler.
It was at the beginning of his freshman year, and there was something going on at the high school. I think the wrestling coach was going to have some type of a pizza social just to try to get new wrestlers to come out. And so he told me that he was going to go to that meeting, and I thought, oh, okay, I had never considered that you would want to participate in sports, and I didn't really consider that you could actually do wrestling.
I had shown all my sons certain, self-defense moves, I guess, and I guess Avery was, reading a book about wrestling, a blind wrestler, actually, and has some interest. So we kind of looked into it. He did some Googling and found there were other blind wrestlers around the country in high school.
It made me nervous from the beginning. Just in general, I think the one time that I watched wrestling was in middle school, and I watched this boy break his arm and snap it in half. But because Avery wanted to wrestle, I couldn't tell him no, even though I really didn't want to see him get his arm snapped in half.
It's a fairly easy accommodation. The only rule change that gets made is that the contact has to remain consistent. So you can't break contact. Other than that, the rules are the same, whether you're sighted or not sighted. And I think it's pretty compelling if you listen to some folks who have wrestled with Avery. You'll hear that experience is one that they won't soon forget.
I feel like, I don't know, it's made me a lot more confident as a person. Like before, when people, there are some things that people do that I just can't do. But, just being able to wrestle and knowing that I've won a lot of matches against people that I could see, like, it just, I don't know, it shows me that I can still do things really well. I just have to find a different way.
So in this particular case, what we had was a coach who didn't feel well prepared or really understand how to incorporate a blind athlete into his wrestling program.
His freshman year, he wasn't allowed to go to districts because the coach didn't feel it would be safe for him. So we kind of let it go because it was his first year, and we were still concerned he could get hurt because he is blind, and he hadn't won any matches, so we understood that.
And then my second year, I had won some matches, so I was kind of disappointed, but I understood. I also didn't realize that it's the same exact people in districts as it is normally, so I don't know, I wish I would have realized that. I might have tried harder to go to districts. Well, to ask my coach, I guess.
And so the parents tried to work a bit with this coach and figure out, well, what can we do to support? And they figured out some best practices. They identified things like, for example, using Avery as a dummy as part of practice sessions where he can be the demonstration person and learn it fairly hands-on. What it morphed into pretty quickly was the responsibility shifting to Avery's brothers and cousins to teach him really as they were learning, and so it was taking away from their ability.
Well, you know, in life, I guess, in Avery's life, he wants to be treated like everyone else. He deserves to be, and we've treated him like everyone else. There are certain situations where, you know, that can't happen. You know, in practice, he was treated like everyone else. And the fact that he can't see, he couldn't see the moves being demonstrated. So when the coach was demonstrating the moves on one of the wrestlers, Avery would stand there and wait until it was all over for someone to show him, which was one of his brothers. So when his brothers were showing him the moves, everyone else was practicing them. They get 3 times each. By the time they had the 3 times each, Avery finally understood the move, and no, they never got to practice it. It happened for 4 years like that. So Avery really never got to practice ever.
My 3rd year, my coach said that I was going to districts and everything. I weighed in. I asked him a few times, like, am I going districts? He said I was.
I addressed the coach and beforehand said if he really wants to go. He told my wife, the coach told my wife and my son he would go. He deserved to go.
We were in the locker room, and then they never called my name. And I was like, hey, I think you guys forgot to call my name. They're like, no, you're not on the roster. So I asked someone about it, and eventually I learned that my coach, actually hadn't intended for me to wrestle. He's like, oh yeah, I just said you could wrestle. I just said you could go here to watch. I didn't say it, but I was like, I was thinking, like, seriously?
And more importantly, he ended up getting excluded from some critical meets. So there was a divisional meet where the coach made a decision to not include him, not because it was going to hurt the competitive nature of the team, but for other reasons that became less clear to the family.
His senior year, and districts came, we arrived at districts, and the coach was acting kind of weird towards us. We didn't know why. He didn't make eye contact or anything. And then it came time for Avery to go up to sign in to wrestle, and I took Avery to the table, and he wasn't on the list.
My coach put me in at the wrong weight class and everything, completely on purpose. Like, he even told me right before I got on the scale that, okay, you have to be in at the 152 weight class, not the 145. And then, I got on the scale, and he just put me in at the wrong weight class. Like, I don't know, I don't get it.
And we had an assistant coach with us from Sheldon. He didn't understand either. So he went directly to the head coach, and he said, Avery disqualified from the tournament. The coach knew Avery was disqualified for 2 hours before that and never told us. Let Avery warm up, let us just act like nothing.
And then, they figured it out, and then they disqualified me. So that was pretty disappointing that, I never got to go to districts. I never got to even try to go to state. Like, I don't know, kind of sucks, but.
And so in this particular case, by the time they figured out what their rights were, he's already graduated from high school and has a horrible taste in his mouth about sports. The coach had really didn't get the benefit of learning and growing as a coach. The administrators are at risk of a lawsuit and tremendous liability here. Most likely civil rights were violated. And so it's really kind of what was left is a mess.
We talked, and a lot of it was we talked about what we were going to do, what we should do, what was the right thing to do. Should we, get legal help? Should we go to the principal, to the coach? It's
always interesting when we're dealing with conflict in sports because really many of us involved with it are athletes ourselves, and we have that competitive nature and we want to win. The instinct to win would lead us probably more towards litigation. We could really assert our rights and assert our power through litigation and through other sources. We're pretty confident we could get the coach fired. We could probably make a number of administrators' lives pretty miserable. And so the competitive side of us wants to go down that route. But then if we really dial it back a little bit and we think about, well, what are our interests? What do we care about? Here, the interest became, well, the family didn't want to punish the school. They wanted to educate the school.
Well, basically, it's very important for kids to participate in sports, particularly in high school. I think it helps focus their attention and energy into something positive. And then coupled with that is that kids that have disabilities sometimes fall through the cracks. And it would be awesome to have something in place where that really doesn't happen.
And so in this situation, for me, it's as much about the other athletes who are teammates for Avery, who get to compete against Avery, as it is about Avery. And really, it's about creating the situation where we don't have people get excluded from sport who really are great members of our sporting community.
And so our whole point of telling our story is to help make sure that this doesn't happen to another family, that another blind wrestler or swimmer that is missing an appendage or anything like that can actually participate in their sport and be happy and productive and feel like they are a contributing member of the team.
I guess so that when we look back on this 10 years from now, it's a positive, feeling, and that Avery did something. When he was on the news, they called him Inspirational Avery. That's kind of how we want to remember the whole situation. Like, this was meant to be. Avery's a strong kid mentally, and he dealt with this. He's bummed, but he dealt with it. He's a mature kid. He's looking at it the right way, and if he sees something positive happen from this, he's stoked. He's happy, and so are we.
Well, I feel like it's a good thing that I wrestled because, I don't know, I think that I've kind of helped show that people, even if you're blind, you can still wrestle or do some kind of sport. It's just, you do kind of have to try harder in some ways, but it's definitely worth doing.